we finally got here. It has been a journey, to say the least. But the reason I'm sitting here in this podcast is solely because of you guys. I know it's a lot, and if I had my way, you would have been the first people on my show. Not only because you're the first.
Can you cut off?
Why? No. If you're feeling emotional about this, you can't imagine what it's like.
Oh.
You don't know what it's like to sit in my seat.
I've never seen you like this.
No, I just feel like, look, you haven't even introduced me, but it's such a nice thing. I've been, look, you're the host, so you should be the one introducing me, but let me just preempt you a little bit. So I've been, I'm an immigration lawyer, and I run an immigration firm that does Canada and U.S. immigration. And my firm helped Renan and his family come to Florida. And we've done literally thousands of cases. But before Renan came, we met for lunch with his lovely wife, and we talked all about the prospect of his family moving to Florida. And you guys were pretty nervous about it, and you were unsure. And Michelle and I gave you, a background as to our journey. And we formed I felt like an instant connection. And Absolutely. I felt really, these are really great people. And then we went through the process, as you know, and I'm sure we'll discuss it. But now, fast forward, has it been a year?
10 months.
10 months.
Close. And
you're here doing what you're doing in Florida, in part because of, what I've done for you and the great gratefulness you've shown. I was prepared for this podcast, but I guess wasn't. It was a little overwhelming. So
I had to actually promise my wife that I'm not going to get, all teary-eyed about it. And in some ways, that's never going to go away. But you guys did a lot more than just bring us down here. You guys literally held our hands, supported us, answered every single stupid question we had from, the cleaning lady. That was an incredible hookup. I think that what people underestimate very often in this move is it seems quite transactional to a lot of people, where they look at the big things that need to happen. You have to start off with an immigration lawyer, and then you kind of gravitate towards the accounting, financial aspect of it. And all these big things like the moving, the buying the house, the realtor, once you kind of get that settled, that's when it really, really becomes real. And it's the little things that get hard. But for you guys, you were there to answer all those questions. And the most ironic thing about the fact that we're doing this podcast here is that we went for dinner probably a month into us moving here, and we were talking about, we should do a podcast. And that's what stuck with me. And that's why we're sitting here today. So the impact that you guys have, we'll never be able to explain properly. But in addition to all of that stuff, like, people ask me all the time, how did you decide to kind of move down? And it was from conversations with people. You guys are not only in the business of, bringing people here, and you're the CEO of Visplace, and I'm going to promote it 17 ways to Sunday. I've probably sent you like a dozen people just your way, and you're accessible, and you send that off right away, and you guys stick handle, and we'll get into that. But you guys made this trek yourselves, and you did it with the foresight of not only the political nonsense that happened in Canada and the impacts of COVID and all that stuff. You did it on your own, right? You did this first. Why did you make the move to Florida?
Well, I can answer that. When I was young, probably around 12 years old, we took a family trip to Delray. And back then, it wasn't what it is today. It was more of a rough area. But we went to this resort called Rod Laver's Tennis Resort, which was a little oasis in Delray at the time. And I was always a tennis guy. I always liked tennis. We went with my family, and I just fell in love with the place. And we've been to Mexico. We've been to other places. But, I said to myself, and I actually remember saying, wow, would it be cool to live here? And this was this is decades and decades ago. And it always stuck in my head that one day I want to move to a warm climate, B, to Florida, and I don't want to wait until I'm retired or a snowbird age. Not that anything's wrong with that, but I just, I felt, this is where I want to be. So as the years progressed, and we had a great life in Toronto, that's where we're from. I built my law practice. We had kids. Michelle was a real estate agent. We lived at, in central Toronto. We had it all. We had a great life. Nothing was wrong with it. I still had this itch that, I can do better. And doing better for me was the concept of moving south and moving to Florida. So I put that in Michelle's head, planted a seed, and I knew I had to wait for that seed to grow. Because we have family here. We're both close to our families. Michelle's very close to her mom in Toronto. And it's a major decision. And, you being from Toronto, it's not like the Americans who are very transient. You have people from New York, people from New Jersey moving everywhere to Florida, right. To everywhere. In Canada, it's a country. Toronto is a big city, but it's like a small town mentality. People don't leave; they live and die there. So when we announced, and I'm fast forwarding a little bit, that we're moving to Florida, like our friends were like, "What? You mean you're going vacation?" Like they didn't even register at the time. But
how long ago was that?
This was we moved 9 years ago?
Yeah, it's been
9 years. I can't believe it's like a flash. Anyway, that was really the impetus for me moving, and the weather and the taxes obviously didn't hurt.
Now you were an immigration lawyer in Toronto.
Correct.
Okay. Did you find that when you moved, you kind of lost some of the relationships that you had in Toronto with some of the people? Did you find that people became a little more distant? They didn't understand why you were leaving? Did you find that it strengthened any of your relationships?
It's a good question. You kind of know who your friends are when something dramatic, positive or negative happens to you.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe that also happened to you. But yes, so I had a network of friends, some of whom unfortunately just fell by the wayside. And no one ever declared to me that, why are you moving? They never expressed any negativity. But I guess in action versus words, I just kind of lost touch with a lot of people. But I've maintained solid friendships, a few in Toronto. So whenever I go back, I see my friends, those who remain.
You still have a location in Toronto?
I still have a location. So I fly back every once in a while.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Why I really wanted to have you on in the beginning of this podcast is because people were asking me a lot of technical questions about the type of visas. How do you come down here? What did you guys do? And this is the premise of the podcast, to become a resource. But it's become a whole lot more than that, because you start to realize that in addition to the technical things, the things that are going to be the most challenging are the people aspect. You're going to start losing some of those relationships and friendships that you've had for God knows how long. You're going to start realizing who your true friends are. You're going to start realizing a lot about yourself, because now it's home team. It was just the two of you guys with young kids coming down here, and there's really no one to fall back on once you get here. So you're starting over. I mean, you said Toronto is a big city, but a small like a small village, and it's absolutely true. When you get down here, you realize that people are different here. We share a language. We do not share a psychology. We have a completely different premise for how life is lived here. And this is a very transient place, for good and bad. All right. So you've been here for 9 years. I can tell you that the way we stumbled upon you was dumb luck. Dumb luck. And it was, if it wasn't for that going right, we would have probably never made the move. And I'll give you an example. We're both on a couple of Facebook pages that have people that promote themselves as immigration specialists, whatever that means. They offer every single service under the sun. We know probably 3 or 4 people directly that we've now transferred over to Visplace, is that paid, I think in some cases 2 to 3 times what we had actually paid to have an executed transaction, and they're still in the process and did not get their visa because of false claims that people make and and they were actually referred into some of these people. I fell into that where midway through my transaction with you guys, I had somebody saying to me, well, you had referred a place for us to put together our business plan, and we'll get into the specifics of the visa. And when I had inquired about if anyone ever used the services of this location, I think it was called Journey or something like that. They said, no, you cannot do that. That business plan isn't good enough to get through customs. You're never going to get your visa. Like, make these crazy false claims to someone who's already nervous or in process of spent money. Like, really, like the wheels are already in motion to make false claims like that. And then for me to find out later that they didn't even execute on that, that would have been devastating. I would have said something like, this is a sign. We're not doing this. We're not moving down here. So we stumbled upon you guys as sheer dumb luck. And it's the best thing that's ever happened. Everything happens for a reason. Since I moved down here, I find myself living by a bunch of cliches. So my wife and I are here on an E2 visa, which is essentially a business visa. I'm a dependent to my wife. I love to.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, absolutely. But now it's like real, right? That's actually psychologically very, I don't want to say demoralizing, but I did have to take a couple of steps back on the ego side because I've never depended on my wife, not from an income perspective, not from a business perspective. And now it's like, you're our path to a green card. You better not fail. That's a whole lot of pressure. And I have to do my part in a different way. And I'm very grateful to do that because now I'm more of a dad than I've ever been before. And I'm never going to give that up. I love every aspect of what I do today. Okay. Before we get into the specifics of the immigration side, Michelle,
Yes.
I want you to tell me what it was like as a mom having a husband who's transitioning his business down here. And I remember you had said to me, the first year is tumultuous, and I'll never forget those. Like, you've talked me down a couple of times over the phone, but while he's doing his thing, which is, I mean, for us, it's kind of inverse. It's like Frances is doing her thing. I'm playing that role of the full-time parent. I'm pretty sure that that's something that you had to do.
For sure. I mean, it was a huge change for me because, we were in very fortunate circumstances. As
Bring the mic a bit closer.
As Michael indicated, in Toronto. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I think so.
And, so we had at the time a lot of support. We had family, we had a nanny, which is very common in Toronto.
Yeah, I had one.
There's a living caregiver program there.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of support. And then all of a sudden we moved to Toronto, and I was essentially on my own. We didn't have any friends.
You mean to Florida?
Yeah, sorry, I meant to Florida. We didn't have any friends. I didn't have family here. There were all the settlement issues, so finding schools, making friends, ensuring my kids had friends. But you're essentially on autopilot, really. You're just trying to get through the year, make sure that the kids are settled, they have friends. A lot of the basic stuff is just set up. We know where to get the best bagels. We know, where to go shopping.
It's those little things.
It's a lot of the little things. And so, for me, I tend to be pretty good at making friends anyway. And I find Florida is very good for that because, as you mentioned, it's very transient.
Yes.
So you tend to have people who are very open here to making friends. As Michael mentioned, Toronto's much more small town. It's a little bit harder.
I know people listening to this are going to hear Toronto, a small town, and are going to get slightly offended. But they're until you've stepped out, you don't realize what that actually means.
Right. So, you have people in Florida, a lot of people that we met in Florida were from somewhere else and very open to making friends. And it was great. So I just went out of my box a lot. For example, I'd never played tennis before, but I joined the tennis team, which was a great thing for me because I made a lot of friends and I could ask a lot of questions. How you find this, who do you go to for that? So, in answer to your question, the first year really was just autopilot, but also we had a lot of fun also. And, we loved the fact that the summer was over, the yucky, hot Florida summers, but we knew we were getting into something better. So, October and November would start, and we were like, wow, isn't this great? We don't have to deal with the winter anymore. Yeah. So there were a lot of exciting elements to it as well, but honestly, Renan, we would walk a lot and look at each other like, can you believe we're in Florida? Can you believe
we say this
we're here
all the time?
So this sense of shock, I can't believe we did it.
Yeah, so 9 years later, we still say it. So it doesn't go away. just heads up. And I'll also say that, you asked the question about friendships in Toronto. I think she's kind of understating it. Our social life has, and I'm not exaggerating, has never been more robust as it has been living in Florida. It's like summer camp, because everyone is a transient. Most people we meet, from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, or Canada. Summer camp. And everyone is motivated to meet people because everyone's new. And, Americans tend, it's a bit of a cliche or a stereotype, but, very friendly, the Northeasterners, like the New Yorkers, and, they're loud or boisterous, but they're very friendly and warm. So we've met so many nice people, and these friendships have sustained themselves. This has been 9 years going on, and we still have the same friends we had when we first moved here. So it's been fantastic socially, and thank God, because my wife's a very social person, and that's really what aside from the palm trees and the beach, it's the social life that really makes the difference.
How old were the kids, by the way, when you guys moved down?
Okay, so my son, I think he was 13 and a half.
Oh, that's a tough age to move.
Yeah.
And your daughter?
My daughter was 9. She was 9. Okay. But I was going to say, just to add to what Michael said is, one thing that we notice just generally about Americans is, they just have this sense of life where they just want to really enjoy life. There's a holiday, everything's over the top. They like to go out. I guess being in warm weather is very conducive to that. So there isn't this sense of reservedness that we found back home, generally speaking. And we really notice it. I mean, we love our friends and family back home, but there is just generally this sense of life here that really people want to enjoy life. So it's just been great that way.
I really want to strip down that stereotype about Canadians being friendlier, and there's nothing wrong with Canadians. I really love Canada. I hate the government. I hate the way they dealt things, but I'm going to still call that home for a couple of years until you get me my green card. But people are making a mistake between Americans and Canadians because Canadians are much more polite.
That's right.
And you said that, Americans are boisterous and stuff. Oh my God. Every New Yorker I've met for the first little while, it's like meeting a 6-year-old whose like arms are flailing in the air and they're doing whatever they want.
That's
and
right.
They have no buffer, no filter, but really their intentions are pure, especially the ones, if you think about it, the New Yorkers that are down here, they've done the same thing we have. They didn't cross a border. They crossed a state. So they all had a green card, but they still uprooted their lives for whatever reason. And you said you came down here and Delray was a bit of a rough area. Now it's like, try to find a spot in Delray. And that's right. Adding to the growth of all of this and the type of people that are coming down here. You see it. Over the last couple of years, I'm sure, and I'd love for you to talk to that. But before we get to that, I want to know, because some of the audience has kids that are approximately the age of your kids when they moved down. How did a teenager handle the transition, and where are they today?
So my son actually, surprisingly, was really excited to come.
Cool.
He's a pretty adventurous kind of guy. So over the years, whenever we've traveled, he's always, had a great time. He was just in Europe with a few friends, so he was really excited about it. Yes, he was young, but he wasn't that attached, I would say, yet still. He hadn't started high school yet. So he was really excited about the whole idea of, wow, we're moving to the U.S. and it's going to be warm all year. My daughter also, she was even younger. She's 3 years younger. So, I think it was probably a little bit scarier for her. She's not as good with transition. But once we got here, they got settled in school and, they made friends. And before you knew it, they were really excited. We moved into a new house and, we were in a nice neighborhood. So they were pretty excited.
You guys were at the Oaks?
Yeah.
I think you had mentioned that. And
yes.
I can go into a whole diatribe about community and how important that is. And I know those gated communities, to some people, especially Canadians that don't know, they think it's a security issue or it's like, a kind of a buffer between us and them. And it's, it's like there's just people having these wild parties and throwing money around. And it's nothing about that, because the communities actually do form behind those gates, and it's pretty cool. Where are your kids today? Are you happy you made the decision for them, or do you want them to go back to Canada?
No, absolutely not. Ironically, my son ended up at the University of Toronto. So
You guys must have saved a ton.
yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So, it's such a highly ranked school, and the fact that he got in, he was very, very excited about that. And it's interesting because, he belongs to a fraternity there and he's,
AE
I don't remember what it's called.
ZBT.
I honestly
ABC.
don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't know, but, and so he's made a lot of friends there and he's done really well there. But if you ask him, would you want to stay in Toronto? We've asked him that. Absolutely not. He keeps saying to us, oh, thankfully we moved. And one of the major reasons, especially for him, because he's 22, he's graduating, is because there are so many, the market's so huge here. So there's so many possibilities. So he's done internships. He has another internship this summer in Georgia. So just the job opportunity, the growth opportunity is just enormous for him. And the same with my daughter. So she goes to a school in Orlando. She's in a college or university program there. She's doing the accelerated MBA program there. I don't even know if they offer that in Canada. So it's the same with her. They're both thrilled that we moved here. And I mean, we've been here long enough now where they've kind of grown up here. So it's just what they know. And I mean, we go back to Toronto. We visit. My mother comes every winter, stays with us for a few months.
I'm surprised she doesn't own a place here, the snowbird lifestyle.
Yeah, no, she doesn't, but she
She stays with us.
Stays with us.
Our house we have 4 bedrooms, so one's reserved for her.
That's really kind of you. We did the same thing. We reserve a bedroom for everyone who's going to come by, and of the 10 months I've been here, half of that has had somebody here. It's almost like we have to brainwash them to understand what it is that we're doing. And you had mentioned about you don't want to be a snowbird when you move down here. I was literally in a U-Haul with my brother who's asking me, why are you doing this? I'm like, listen, are you going to own a place here one day? He's like, yeah, probably. When? He's 50 now. He's like, yeah, 5, 10, whatever. I'm like, I don't want to wait.
Yeah.
I want it now.
Yeah.
I want that lifestyle now.
Yeah.
Right? And the first year is tough. It's tough, doesn't even begin to describe it. There's strains on a marriage, and between that and finances, when you're in a comfortable situation and you've established businesses, those will be the things that will play psychologically on your mind much more than any other thing, at least for us, that's been. And I don't want to say my marriage is on the rocks by any stretch. It's a better version of what it's been ever, but it's trial by fire.
Yeah, absolutely. And we went through the same thing in terms of, trying to run a business remotely. We did the pre-COVID thing. So during COVID, everyone, kind of figured out, hey, we can work virtually and, through in a remote way. But we've been doing this for almost a decade. And in the first year was trial by fire. We had no idea if this is going to work. I deputized one of my head lawyers to be our quote-unquote managing director. And we just rolled the dice to see if this is going to fly. And there was a lot of bumps along the way. We lost some staff. Some of our clients weren't too thrilled. But we worked out the bugs, and it was very, very stressful. There were moments when I said to Michelle, I'm not sure if this was the right decision.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, we motored through it, and every year got better and better and better. And, life happens, right? So even while living here in Florida, there's always challenges in work. So that's never going to go away, whether or not, you stay put or you move. That's just part of, as you know, part of business. But, I'm grateful that we together as a couple had the courage and the tenacity to see it through, because we're better for it.
And it's interesting, if you don't mind me adding, that
Never.
It's interesting because so Michael and I were always pretty adventurous in that way. We never really stayed put. Even in Toronto, we would every 2.5 years move. Everyone would make fun of us all the time. Oh, you're moving again, you're moving again. So in some ways, I think people were surprised that we were moving here.
It's my ADD, I can't sit still. We have to keep going.
Yeah. And
Are you moving? Are you leaving?
We're not.
Oh, okay.
Not for
We're
now.
not. No,
All right.
we're happy. But, it's interesting because when Michael first suggested moving, I was the holdout. I'm not sure if I told you this, but in my mind, I was like a typical Torontonian. Like, what do you mean you want to move?
there's guns here and it's
Well,
hot.
it wasn't even where we were going, but the fact that, we lived in a great area in Toronto, we had family there, my kids were settled. Why would we think of moving? And initially I was thinking, well, I'm not moving to Florida. I'm not a Florida person. Let's go somewhere like sexier, like California.
Right.
So
My wife said the exact same thing.
yeah, so we flew down to San Diego.
Thank God.
Yeah, we flew down to San Diego. We had a real estate agent. We were pretty close to putting an offer in.
Oh, really? Ooh.
Yeah, we were very serious.
Dodge that bullet.
I kiboshed that right away after I explained that to her.
Yeah, we dodged the bullet. I'm sorry to interrupt, but look, topographically, it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful state. It's absolutely stunning. Weather's really nice. But it's a West Coast culture, and aside from the politics, first of all, the time zone is very difficult. The travel time is very difficult. It's just not practical, and taxes and all that. So we got it out of our system, and then we moved back to Toronto, thinking, okay, well, let's just stay. And then the ice storm hit. I don't know if you remember. This was
ice storm hits. 12 hours later, I'm in Costa Rica.
Wow.
That's how I did it.
Well, that was our last straw. And I said to Michelle, this is it. We're going to try Florida. So I flew down there, sight unseen. I saw.
So impulsive.
And we didn't even know. We heard Boca was a nice place to raise a family.
I used to hear it was a place to retire.
Yeah. Well, that was the extent of our research. Went down to Boca, met a realtor who we're still friends with today. She showed us around. We found we and Michelle ultimately flew down, and we found a place that was on spec, and we just did it. It was very little analysis. We just did it. It was gut instinct, and
in my mind also, and maybe it's good that I didn't know what I know now in a way, but I thought to myself, well, what's the worst case scenario? We hate it. We can always go back.
What would you have done differently if you had to go back?
If I had to, if I could do.
Yeah, if you knew you were going to come down, but if you were to save some people some of the angst, what would you have done differently?
So, I don't think this is answering your question, but my original thought is always, I wish we had bought more property when we moved here 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Because, real estate values going up, maybe I would have bought. Well, I was going to say potentially in a different location, but I don't think so because we made so many good friends. I don't really know what we could have done differently. I mean, you do as much research as you can, and then, a bit of it is a crapshoot,
Well, I have an answer. I was prepared for the immigration, but I really wasn't.
But you were already in that space, right?
Well, let me it's an interesting perspective because I was already in that space as a service provider, but I was never a client. And, being at the other end of the equation, actually waiting for your visa. I mean, you've experienced this, being at the mercy of a anonymous visa officer, waiting for the application to come up, is very stressful and anxiety ridden. So I didn't really prepare. I thought that I was prepared because we've helped so many people, but we've never done it ourselves. So maybe I should have spoken to some of my clients and say, how was it? I mean, they're very grateful and thankful as you are, but maybe I should have interviewed a few more people or anybody and said, look, hey, how did it go? The other thing.
Like what you did with us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, like you did. So you
I'm an inquisitive guy.
Yeah. So that's one thing, just to prepare myself.
Do you find that all that going through it, now having a company that's exploding, and do you understand the process better and it's made your business stronger because of it?
Absolutely. So it reminds me of the hair clubs for men, that old commercial where,
Mark Gideon was here saying, I'm not a hair club for men.
Yeah, exactly. So that becomes a theme, right? So yeah, the empathy thing really helps, work with the clients because now you really know what they're going through, not just from a technical legal perspective, but from an emotional lifestyle perspective. The other thing I wish I prepared myself for was the tax. Now, I'm not a tax person. I had no idea about the tax complications and the challenges.
Which tax are you referring to specifically? The
Well,
departure tax?
Departure tax. There's dividend tax. There's so many different kind of taxes, especially if you own your own business. and moving to another country where you have assets, the government in Canada doesn't, look too favorably upon you. You have to make sure that you dot your I's, cross your T's from a tax perspective. I wasn't prepared for all that. I just was thinking immigration. So if I did it again, I would have braced myself and kind of prepared myself better for that.
Visplace is the reason we chose the visa we have. So I mentioned before, and I mentioned on the podcast several times, that I'm on an E2 visa.
Right.
Do you find that is the visa that most people are using right now to come down? And we looked at several options as well. One of them was a TN, which then they really didn't need me because I'm a dime a dozen kind of person. But my wife has a very unique specialty, and they could have come down. But from what I recall, on a TN, only she can work, and it's good for 2 years, and then I'm basically just waiting around until somebody sponsors her for a green card.
Right. Well, disclaimer, this is not legal advice, and I don't actually practice U.S. immigration. We have a U.S. visa team that does it, and they did my visa. So I'll speak anecdotally. Basically, an E2 is a very popular visa. And
why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, not all countries qualify for an E2. You have to be part of the treaty. So if you're if you're from some countries, you can't even qualify. But Canada, fortunately, is part of that. And why it's popular? Because it's very open-ended. If you can start your own business or partner up with someone 50-50 in the U.S., it could be virtually any business, so long as you're actively managing and running the business. You can, and then you make an investment. It doesn't have to be crazy investment.
Is there a minimum threshold requirements? Because originally people threw around all kinds of numbers.
Yeah, from my experience, and again, you should have to speak to a qualified.
We're going to get to the specifics of it with one of your lawyers.
Yes, but I'll answer. I don't think there's a minimum. Every officer who evaluates the case will look at it contextually. So if it's a small business, they're not going to expect you to invest $500,000. That doesn't make sense. In fact, that could hurt your case because you're over-investing. So it should be, proportional to the kind of business that you're investing in. So it could be as small as $30,000 all the way up to $1 million. So it's pretty open-ended, and that's why it's very attractive. The other thing, it gives you a maximum of 5 years, and it's extendable and extendable.
In perpetuity.
Yeah, but you have to apply, and they still evaluate you after every 5 years. But theoretically, you can keep going and keep going and keep going, and you're, as you alluded to, your spouse can work on an open work permit. So it's it's a pretty attractive way of coming.
You mentioned your kids and the opportunity in the marketplace, and that cannot be understated when you're down here. And through your challenges of moving down here and what you've done. You were able to put together a team of people that are helpful. And the one common thing that I kept hearing from someone like Mark Guinean or yourself and a few of the other people that you had introduced us to was, if you're willing to hustle, if you're willing to work, there's so much more opportunity here than there is in Canada. And it's surely based on size. And I'm starting to see that. It's nice to hear because it puts a little bit of the anxiety that you have. It doesn't extinguish the fire. It just kind of douses it a little bit, right? There, it's still there. So you look at the market share and the opportunities. It's certainly here, but I'm not here just to extend my E2 visa in perpetuity. I want to give my kids the green card that you gave your kids, right? What is the path afterwards? And I'm basically trying to poach free legal advice. I know you can't give it to me. It's all anecdotal because you're the president and CEO, but what do I do in year 2, 3 as I can start showing financials that are growing on both of our sides?
Yeah, so we have friends in again from Toronto who live here who came on an E2 and now are applying for a green card.
How far into the process?
They just applied last month or around that time. So they've been on an E2 probably for around close to 5 years, I think it is.
So what, around the end of...
Around the end, and then they applied for a green card. And I believe the visa that they applied for was an EB-5, which is an investor visa, which is not too different than an E2, but it's permanent. And there's different criteria, but it's basically if you can, run a business, hire a certain amount of people, show growth. You submit the application, and it's processed, and ultimately you can potentially get approved for a green card. So that's the path, and that's a natural path for an entrepreneur to go through from an E2 to an EB5. And there's no direct path. It's not like some visas you can go from one type of visa and then you transfer formally to another visa, a permanent residence. Not so with an E2, but that is a common path, and I didn't do it that way because I had a business in Canada. I applied as an intercompany executive under the EB1C category, which is a little different. But for those who don't have a business back in their home country and a branch or an affiliate in the United States, that approach that I mentioned, the EB5, is a very popular approach.
Will the EB5 give your kids a social?
Yeah, like everything is, social work permit
Can you vote?
No, because you're a permanent resident. You can only vote once you're a citizen. And, a citizen usually, depending upon how you get permanent residence, you can get citizenship after 3 years or 5 years, depending upon your path of permanent residence.
Right. So I think that's something that I have butchered for sure in my own mind, thinking we're going to, while we're on the E2, my wife's company is hiring, almost every week now. By the end of this year, probably have like 10 or 20 employees already. I thought, well, now that would make a really good case towards going towards a green card, but it doesn't seem to be that's the path. It's an EB5.
Well, an EB5 is a path to a green card.
Oh, okay. So that's what you kind of have to go through.
Yeah.
So what in terms of timelines, what are we looking at from?
I mean, it varies tremendously. It's the government. So, what our firm says, and again, you'd have to talk to our U.S. lawyers who know the real answer. From what I gather, it's probably around at least a year and a half, could be longer.
One thing I found really cool about you guys, and I'm really I'm not getting paid to promote or plug this. I'm talking from my own perspective. In terms of timelines, you were dead on. That you guys didn't miss a beat. And there was moments of panic for us when we're filling, because you have to go through so much paperwork. You have to do so many things to prepare. I remember rolling up to that window at the U.S. Embassy in Toronto, and my wife and I were dressed like we were getting remarried. We got nails done, hair done. We were really prepared.
How could they say no?
No, well, that's
clearly.
Listen to this. We roll up and we're bringing, we're wheeling in a briefcase of all the paperwork that we have, duplicates and triplicates in case we have to leave it all there. We studied it for days in advance. We did a pre-interview twice with your people because I was just so crazy about this, because it was like a rolling of the dice. If we don't get into this, we've taken major steps back to what we believe will be leaps forward. And we roll up to the wicket, and right before us, a guy comes up to somebody at the U.S. Embassy. And even before the conversation starts of any formal interview, he hands over his documentation and they say, "Sir, did you get arrested when you were 19 years old for something or other?" And I'm overhearing this, right? On the spot denial. And I'm thinking, I do not want to get this person. I do not want to get this person. And this guy who must have been in his early 50s, and he's like, "I made a mistake when I was 19. I was partied. No, bye.
Yeah.
Go home."
Yeah.
And it was just, like you said, completely based on the whim of that individual. That was the guy who took us. He looked at me. He looked at my wife. His 3 kids. They weren't with us. But, he just looks at, I think there was a profile. It almost seems like that. Asked us some questions. All right, give us your passports.
Right.
We'll see you in a couple of days. And the passports were there for pickup. And it was exactly like your office said it would be. Were we over-prepared? Yes. Were we overstressed? Absolutely. Was it worth it? Absolutely. But we're still here on a gamble. And what I mean by a gamble is that it's a 5-year visa that can be renewed in perpetuity. What I call it is a 5-year field trip. I didn't come here for a 5-year field trip. Right. I came here to establish a better life, a new life. And the one thing people don't understand when they move over, and it doesn't matter when you talk to people about taxes and the medical space here, which is also a clusterfuck. I mean, that's just, an understatement, and it's a learning process, is that they don't understand how much of a gamble it really is, right? And how much it's worth it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Because when you get past that initial hump, like the first couple of months are crazy. Like, you don't know anything, right? And especially when you've got little kids here. And you're like, okay, we survived this aspect of it. Now we got our socials, now we can start building businesses. And then, like, my wife's business, this is 10 months down the line, is now starting to earn revenue, like real revenue. And that started from nothing, right? Humans thrive best when they have hope.
That's right.
When they're challenged and create something within that challenge. It's not the accomplishment. The accomplishment is the reward. And then complacency is a terrible thing. But once you realize that you can do all these things within these challenging parameters, then you start to really realize what your potential is. And if I would have taken the same approach to my life and my businesses as I am here with my back up against the wall, I sometimes think, I'm like, what could I have already accomplished?
Yeah.
But I'm thankful I didn't, because I would have never left.
Yeah, so things have a way of working themselves out. Like, when you challenge yourself, you go outside your comfort zone and you struggle, but you ultimately thrive, and you see yourself kind of like from the outside in, watching yourself, accomplish things, or your spouse. It's a really gratifying feeling, and it doesn't matter if you're in Toronto, Australia, or South Florida. And the visa process and moving is a major life decision. We tell that to our clients. It's like, having a baby. It's like a divorce. It's like a major life decision. So
yes.
you have to treat it that way. It's
Absolutely.
not something flippant. You gotta take a deep breath and plan ahead. It's not just the visa. It's about, as you mentioned, coming to a new place, meeting new friends, starting a new business. And but it's not for everybody. It's just not for everybody. And, when we, I'll have to say one thing. When we were speaking of Mark Gideon, a previous guest, he was our cross-border accountant. He's fantastic.
Man's a genius.
He's a genius, and I don't say that lightly. I don't call a lot of people geniuses.
Genius.
He knows his way around the tax code like Mozart does when he does, with music. Anyway, I asked him, Mark, are you preparing for the eventuality that in case we want to return to?
Oh yeah, I know what's coming.
And I go, he goes, no. And I go, isn't that irresponsible? Don't you have to in case do a plan B for us in case it doesn't work out? He goes, in my 30 years, whenever, no one moves back.
Yeah, he told me the same.
No one moves back.
And
I go,
see
okay. And I can see why. So, look, Toronto's a great city in a lot of ways, but it's an upgrade moving here.
I don't think people realize it though, because it's almost the forest in the trees
Yeah.
scenario. You really don't get it until you leave.
Right.
And then you start looking, wow, there's a lot of great things going on here that I never experienced living back home.
But I think there's also a lot of great things, not just in the surroundings. It's that you learn about yourself when you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Right. And all of us, you, like me, we as families, and we didn't have to leave. It was a choice that we made. And then had a lot of people questioning us about it, probably still do. I find that a lot of those people that are asking me questions are now calling me for advice. And it's usually an email to you with a CC, right? And then again, I cannot emphasize this. What I saw with you guys after understanding, and hindsight's always 20/20, it was pure and dumb luck that we stumbled upon each other, is your organization offered value more than anyone else.
Thank you.
It's not about how much you spend. It's about what you get. You guys were not the cheapest that I spoke to. You were far and away not the most expensive, but you were the ones who got it done in the quickest way possible. And then you didn't leave us be after we arrived. And we just happened to be grateful enough to you guys were happened to be grateful enough to spend the time with us and talk to us and have gone through it. That's just a happy and lucky coincidence. But now a lot of people are paying it forward. I'm one of those people, and I do it very often. And I spend a lot of time talking to people, and that was the birth of the podcast, right? And look where we are today.
I think a lot of people, though, generally tend to live life on a bit of a treadmill.
Yeah, of course.
In that quote unquote autopilot mind frame, where things seem fine. There's nothing to upset the apple cart in any way. So why make a change?
Sure.
A lot of people don't sit back actively and think, what can I do differently? How can we make things even better? So it really takes some of that mindset as opposed to being more passive. So, for example, you have people maybe where work isn't going so well or things aren't going well, and then they decide based on that to make a change. But when life is going pretty okay,
right,
most people don't, at that point, want to make a big change.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
So,
one thing about risks, one risk I wouldn't take is not to take risks. And the idea of just staying in your comfort zone and not having the opportunity to upgrade your life and to explore, to find new frontiers, that's a risk I'm not prepared to take. So ironically, people call me a risk taker. I think people who don't take risks are the biggest risk takers. And
I could not agree with you more.
I am,
and I'm a product of immigrants twice. Right. And they had their why was much stronger than mine, but they did it. Right. And it's pretty cool. Look, you must have seen this entire shift over the last couple of years. Have you seen the biggest growth within your company right around COVID? Is that a fair statement to say?
It's definitely the biggest interest from Canada and some other countries too. People, places where COVID restrictions were the most tight, like all of Canada, in Toronto in particular. People like yourself and others have gotten so fed up, and that was what pushed them over the edge.
So do you think that was the straw that broke the camel's back?
In many respects. For me, it was the ice storm back 10 years ago, and for a lot of people, it was COVID. So sometimes there's just an event that happens that it pushes people over the edge. But for people who never thought of moving or never wanted to move or immigrate, they often just don't do it. But there's a lot of people who have it in their mind, and they just are looking for an excuse to do it. And COVID served up that excuse.
Do you find that that's still carrying it forward? Because Canada's open, quasi-socialist, but I mean, I don't want to just be about just the politics, but do you find that people are still making this move? Like there's a lot in the queue, or is the backlog still there?
Yeah, we always, pre-COVID, during COVID, and now post-COVID, there's always a demand because of the market and job opportunities, and depending upon where you want to go, weather. So there's and people sometimes it's just through marriage. They meet someone online and their spouse happens to live in the United States. So there's a myriad of circumstances that are beyond any specific political or a specific event. So there's always this demand of moving to, America. Although Canada is a big immigration destination too. So
are you doing a lot of immigration?
Yeah, half our business is Canada, but usually from South Asia and other countries where, the Canadian system is a little easier to navigate and qualify for, yes. So a lot of people will choose.
I would never thought that.
Yeah, a lot of people will choose Canada over the United States just by virtue of the fact that it's harder to get admission.
Where are you finding the overwhelming majority of people are moving within the United States?
Oh, well, a lot of them are just moving to what I would call red states, southern states. And I mean, these are statistically backed. You look at South Carolina, North Carolina, Texas, and Florida are the net migration most popular states within the United States and outside. So you're seeing a lot of Americans, and I'm sure you hear this in the news, moving from places like California and New York.
California is the one.
To these places. So you're not getting so many immigrants moving to California as you are state of Florida, domestically and internationally.
Right. Yeah. And that seems to be a theme that I see with the small sample size, specifically vis-a-vis a school. The schools have become very competitive. They don't have enough seats for all the students. And the overwhelming majority of the people that are here goes California, New York, and then everybody else.
That's right.
For me, I thought Toronto was a major play, and it's small. Toronto, Montreal, it's small because it's just like it's just a sample size of the States versus Canada, right? Florida is almost a population of all of Canada. I know. There's a disparity there, but it's not exactly the same.
And you can't really compare, the immigration to domestic migration because of the border. So a lot more people, I would argue, in let's say Canada, would move to Florida or some other states if it wasn't for the barrier that is immigration. It is very tough. We're all fortunate to qualify and get through the immigration. People talk about the border wall, this big wall along the Rio Grande or whatever. The biggest wall is a legislative wall. It is for people who are well-intending immigrants, people who are qualified, who would contribute wonderfully to the economy and to the culture, people who we want are shut out. And it's very, very difficult to get visas because of the long queues, the crazy criteria. And there's that's where the real wall exists. And that's my job, to try to get people over that wall.
What would you say the rejection rate is?
Well, it depends on the visas, right? And it depends on the country.
Me too.
I mean, the statistics are almost impossible I couldn't answer that with any accuracy because there's so many variables. You're talking about the visa types, you're talking about the countries. There are graphs and charts for that, but I wouldn't,
How long is the queue?
Well, it depends. Like from certain countries, South Asia, could be decades.
Canada,
United States, because of our shared border and treaties, it's not as long. I mean, depending upon some visas, you can get it right at the border, like instantaneously. Like literally, you go to the port of entry and you can get the visa on the spot. That's usually a temporary visa, but for permanent residents, it could be within a year.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've noticed, but we've noticed a lot that when you talk about this with Americans, they're absolutely flabbergasted how difficult it is for Canadians to get here. We get asked all the time, like, why doesn't your mother come and move here?
They have no clue.
There's no path. Mm-hmm. So they just don't understand. They think we're Canadian, we're neighbors, it's so easy, but it's not.
It is never more evident to me how different we are, not when I come here, but when I go back. And I was recently in a hockey tournament with my son, so I flew in a couple of times. And watching TV, like hanging out with people, it feels different. And the best way I can describe it, I've had a lot of Canadians say this to me as well, is that when I'm in Canada, I feel tired. It just I don't know what it is exactly, but it just seems like you're constantly driven into this quasi sad kind of depressive zone. I don't know whether it's I miss coming back here and stuff like that. But do you guys hear people say stuff like that?
I think it's so funny that you're saying that because Michael always says to me whenever he looks at photos of me from when we lived in Toronto, he's always saying you look so much more tired than you do in Florida.
Yeah, it wears you down.
And I see it. It's a harder life.
It could be a big city thing, maybe, but and it's also probably a weather thing. Look, there's a reason for seasonal affective disorder, and maybe it's more ubiquitous than we believe it is. I know I've never been formally diagnosed with it, but I can tell you, when the sun's out, which is most of the time here, I'm just in much better mood. And even when there's a cloudy day, which is a rare thing here, I feel a little bit, less animated. So living in Toronto, where it's almost always overcast, that could have an impact. I don't know. This is a theory, but
I think the longer you live here, the more you're going to notice it when you go back. That you're really going to see a difference, just culturally. There's a difference definitely, and just the people, the approach to life. It's different.
Yeah,
we are in a quasi bubble here because we live in this isn't all of the United States. This isn't all of Florida. We're near the ocean. It bodes well to an upper middle class kind of lifestyle. So there is a bubble here, but what people don't understand is that there's still tons of value here, from real estate prices to all these things that you need to figure out. And I want to strip away some of those misconceptions on both sides of the border, because Canada does have its pros and cons. Right now, I think until the government changes, then, we're not going to really see what Canada is, because the Canada I grew up in doesn't exist. I'm going to assume that you guys feel the same way. But there's so much opportunity on both sides. And until people experience it, they won't know what's really out there. I don't know whether I'm happier because I'm in growth mode and it's really challenging and it's harder and it's consistent. It's fight or flight here for me almost every single day. because of establishing businesses and trying to reemerge as a dad a lot more, because I have to be front and center for my kids a lot more so my wife can grow her business and we can take our path towards a green card. Maybe it's the weather, maybe it's not. But I do know that when you're just sitting around, and maybe 2 years of lockdowns in Toronto, I was really depressed for a while. And I don't know where I would have been if we didn't make this move. There's so much more I want to discuss and talk to you guys about, but I know we did. Our first path was a consult with someone at Visplace. If somebody wants to really start the process, unless you tell me otherwise, I'd say is book that original call where you speak to a lawyer and ask those questions, because we had a lot of preconceived notions that were put to rest very quickly by one of your lawyers saying, no, these are your options and here's the pros and cons to each. Here's the one that I suggest to you based on, and then you sit and think about it. So how should people start this process, and how can they get a hold of you guys?
Yeah, thanks. They can go to our website, www.visplace.com. There's an online booking section where you can actually book a consult online.
How much is the consult?
It ranges, from, let's just say $100. And if you retain us, that is credited.
Correct.
It's really we don't really call it a consult fee. It's more of a booking fee, because we have a lot of technology that match makes you with the right consultant, and that's kind of what you pay for. And then when you speak to the consultant, it's not really a fee that we charge. If you retain us to help you, we'll outline what path is best for you, and then you'll be assigned a lawyer who will take care of you. So that's kind of the process.
Yeah, and that's what we encountered, and I constantly talk to people about you guys.
Thank you.
You did it. Like it's so easy to want to promote and help out people that were there for you.
Well, it goes both ways. The gratitude you show us and the fact that you guys are thriving as a family really, really, makes it, it sounds like a cliche, but it makes it all worth it. It's not just about, being in business and making money, but it's actually changing people's lives. And we've changed our own lives, and seeing that we can do it, for you guys and for other people. It's a real gratifying thing. And I'm grateful for being given the opportunity to do this.
As are we. And we also, and I say we, myself, my wife, I'm sure you guys feel the same way. We want the people that want to be here, and they will be the ones that help us build those communities for our kids into the future. So, that $100 or whatever consult fee or whatever, it is a drop in the bucket and well worth just to have a preliminary call so you can understand what your path is, what your options are, and how to do it. And if anybody tells you that it's an easy transition, it's not. But if anybody tells you that it's not worth it, they have no idea what they are talking about, because people are so afraid to live up to their own, failures, if you will, because they don't want to take responsibility for it. But there's no way of failing. You just might not achieve what you want to get as quickly as you can get, but you stick with it. Yeah. You can always go back to Canada, right?
Yeah, and there's no crystal ball, and everyone has a plan, and often it doesn't work out exactly as planned, but sometimes it ends up being better than you anticipated.
Right.
And that's just the allegory for life in general, right? And that's just the way it goes.
What if it turns out better than you expect?
Yeah, there's bumps.
There's bumps,
you
and
go there knowing that, you have that expectation. It's just not always going to run smooth every day. A lot of little things you take for granted from being in Canada that you never had to think about before.
Yes, they do a lot of thinking for you, a lot of, some of the heavy lifting Canada takes away. We're paying for it, but yes, it absolutely does. Here, things are a lot more fragmented, and you have to be a little more responsible. And we're not trying to scare people away from any of this. We're trying to be a resource.
Right.
But you guys are the best.
Coming in.
But even if you know that, we knew that. We kept saying, we know it's going to be hard. We know it's going to be hard. We were not prepared. And we will never be prepared, because you don't know what's coming down, right? How many times? Today is a perfect day. My son is at home. he doesn't have a fever today anymore. We're being extra cautious, and that's 2 years of lockdown will do that to you. I've been constantly. So we are now adjusting your schedule because I didn't want to miss the podcast with you. Francis had an appointment to go out. Now we're shifting and moving because we don't have any help in childcare. These are small little bumps, but they're not insignificant because we do not have a day off. We do not have a fail switch. I don't have anyone to call to come and sit with my kids. I don't have any of those resources, right? And it is hard, and no matter how hard you think it's going to be, you are not prepared. But it's like, you know, going to the gym. If you are not sore the next day, you have done nothing, right?
That's right.
If you want to better your life, which is what we believe we have, it comes at a cost. And the cost is reemerging in a different version of yourself that didn't exist before you arrived. And a lot of the things that I didn't think I could do or wanted to do, I now do. And I think I am an absolute moron from running away from these responsibilities, right? And now I believe that I can do anything, right?
Great.
So you guys were supposed to be the first podcast because you guys are the first domino to fall. You guys, we talk about gratitude. I hope you can sincerely feel what I have towards you guys, and the fact that if we needed to, we can even, you know, drop a phone call and still ask, and we weren't just a client that you helped get a visa. You know, there's a lot to be said about that. You guys are the best. Thank you guys for taking the time. I appreciate it very much.